Hi guys and welcome back to Is It Worth It Reviews. Today we are going to talk about quite affordable DAP coming from Fiio. It's Fiio JM21 and this one goes for $199 US. So it's one of the most affordable DAPs on the market really. And what you get for that amount of money is quite a decent screen size at 4.7 inches and good resolution too. I think it's 720p, I'll put that on the screen, but everything looks very crisp, very high resolution, colorful, and it's really quite nice to use. The whole device is not particularly weighty and chunky, so it's quite lightweight for its size, that's a good thing. Part of the reason is probably because it's mostly made out of plastic. So just this green, bluish kind of strip is like a very thin piece of aluminum, but then the rest of the back and the device is made of plastic. It's not some kind of cheap plastic or anything that deducts from the feel, but that choice does keep both the price and the weight down to reasonable levels. Now on the sides you can see normal buttons for play, pause, skip track, previous track, volume buttons of course, and then power on, off. The bottom of the device hosts two analog outputs. One is 3.5 millimeters single-ended, the other one is 4.4 millimeters balanced out. Both of these can be configured to be headphone outputs with variable volume, but also line outputs with fixed volume level. And one USB-C, this is a multi-purpose one, you charge the device using it, and if you maybe decide to use it as a DAC only attached to some other digital source like your PC for example, then USB-C can act as a digital input too. And given that we have this decent size screen and device overall, the battery is quite nice too, so you can expect up to 11 hours of playtime if you use a single-ended output and around 9 hours if you use balanced output. By the way, as usual, if you can, I suggest do use balanced out because it does provide more power, up to 700 milliwatts. As Fiio says, compared to single-ended one that is around 200 milliwatts, definitely not as powerful and not as high voltage. The DAC chip that Fiio opted for comes from Cirrus Logic and the whole device runs on an Android system. This means that you can basically install any app that you want from the Play Store, Google Play Store, including streaming services like Spotify, YouTube Music, Tidal, Qobuz, etc. So there are lots of options and lots of software and apps that you can use, and you don't have to use the Fio's own integrated one. But in some cases, if you're really into high fidelity, you want to use Fiio app, because while using it, you can change your mode from Android to so-called pure music mode. So at that moment, everything else from the operating system and all other apps will be turned off, and only your music player will keep working, and believe it or not, it actually starts sounding slightly better than the Android like general purpose mode. We'll talk about that just a bit later in the sound section. For now, what I wanted to say that given that this is an Android experience with UI and apps and settings and everything is quite familiar, and this runs at a fairly modern Snapdragon chipset, so performance is good too, and it's basically a very modern, high-quality, user-friendly DAP. The most interesting option is that ability to go into the music pure mode and change your gain in 3 levels, low, medium and high. Aside from that, I don't want to bother you too much with just features and specs. You can always check all of that on the official web page. The most important thing in my mind for this review is to see how it actually performs. So I started listening to JM21 and I noticed first of all that it's very nicely balanced tonally, and Fiio always does that. In my opinion, they always have very pleasant sound signature, which means that first of all, they never lean heavily on resolution in a way that the sound becomes too sharp, overbearingly sharp, and maybe analytical or lean like some brands can. With Fiio, it's always a good balance between how resolving something is, but also how pleasant and tonally just right and musical it sounds. And most of that comes from paying special attention to the mid-range and its integration with highest frequencies and lowest frequencies. And it's the same with JM21. Mid-range sounds very rich, it's also full sounding, and we have this pleasant, ever so slight warmth in the mid-range and like upper bass, mid-bass that is just naturally filling vocals and tones with a bit of full bodiness and adding a bit of warmth that is so well judged that it's barely even fair to call this DAC warm sounding, but you definitely notice that warmth and that fullness that is very pleasant. Now the bass line itself goes quite deep, it's decently powerful and decently punchy, so is the mid-bass, and that lower frequency section connects with the mid-range really well. You never feel that there is like distinct bass then distinct mid-range or upper mid-range kind of divide between frequencies that some devices can do. Here everything blends very nicely. The same goes for highs. We have smooth transition from the mid-range to upper mid-range in that presence region that can sometimes be a bit too zealous to throw details at you, and highest frequencies can sometimes do the same, but here we have plenty of detailing, great high frequency extension, but everything feels very nicely and naturally connected with the mid-range. And I did notice by testing many devices through the years that Fiio almost always nails that part of tonality and just blending all the frequencies together in a natural sounding whole. Now, moving away from tonality, we have quite decent sound staging. It's not some widest, airiest, biggest sound stage that you can imagine, but everything is decently wide, decluttered, tones are precise, they're pinpointed okay and separated okay too. This is a clean sounding, resolving sounding device. And also dynamics, also pretty fine. We have good, decent rhythm following capability. There's decent punch of the bass when it's needed. And if I listen to a well-recorded song in isolation with this device, with any headphones or earphones, I'm just happy with its sound. For all in-ear models, it has more than enough power to drive everything that I threw at it. With bigger headphones, you can easily drive all reasonably demanding, especially dynamic driver headphones like Sennheiser's, Beyerdynamics, Meze headphones like 105 AER that I tried, even Aune SR7000, those are much pricier than the DAP itself, but you have enough power, enough gain and volume to drive them. On the other hand, be reasonable, don't try to drive very demanding planners, like for example VRM 2. Those are desktop headphones. They need lots of power to be woken up. But everything else, everything that is considered portable and reasonable to be powered through portable devices works really well with this one. So to sum it up quickly, you'll have plenty of power, plenty of just clarity and resolving sound mixed with great tonality, great natural tonality where nothing sticks out and annoys you. And just one more thing before we go to comparisons. If you decide to use that pure music mode, and if you are one of those critical listeners, you'll definitely notice an improvement in the sound fidelity. Probably the first thing that I've noticed is that the sound became slightly more coherent and it gained more natural smoothness. That thing that I like calling tone liquidity. That improves when you go into pure music mode. Everything sounds just a bit more reverberant and the tone trails are slightly more obvious, you can follow them with more ease, and that tone decay is just a bit more natural and cleaner. go back to the Android mode and the sound becomes slightly grittier and slightly flatter. The differences are really small, I'm just describing them. If you're not much of a critical listener, you might not even notice them, or you can be like, yeah, I can hear it, but he's giving that way more significant than it really is. But on the other hand, if you are a critical listener, you'll notice that. You'll probably appreciate that gained smoothness and just tone coherence, but also slightly darker background with slightly more spacious soundstage. Combine that with that tone coherence, and for me personally, I know that most of my time would be spent in the music pure mode with this DAP. Try it for yourself, see if you can notice an important difference or not. Because now we move to comparisons. To put Fiio JM21 fully through its paces, I decided to compare it to my current and for some time reference DAP around this price point, and that's Hiby R4. This one, as you can see, is a bit chunkier. It's definitely thicker, it's a bit bigger, even though it has the same size screen, 4.7 inches. This means that you do have a bit bigger battery and it does last a bit longer. But also the R4 is weightier because all of its sides are made from aluminium, and bigger battery also means bigger weight. So generally speaking, it is sturdier but chunkier and weightier. And it comes at $50 a higher price than the Fiio JM21. Spec-wise and feature-wise, these are much more similar than they are different, so I will not spend too much time talking about that. So let's talk about the differences in their sonic signature. In a direct comparison, I can notice few things. Hiby R4 sounds just a bit more spacious. It feels that there is a bit more soundstage width and empty room and airiness around the instrument. The difference is not huge, but when you listen to it for a few songs and you get used to that slightly airier, slightly bigger soundstage, you'll notice that Fiio JM21 is doing a bit narrower soundstage. Other than that, dynamics is also a bit punchier, and Hiby R4, even though it has less power on paper, less milliwatts, I think 500 something compared to 700 of Fiio JM21, Hiby R4 in fact sounds just a touch punchier and a touch slammier. And those are basically the differences. So it boils down to your personal preferences. Do you want something that does perform slightly better, like Hiby R4, but it is also $50 pricier, chunkier, thicker, and weightier? Or you would prefer something that sounds almost as good, but in a thinner and more lightweight body, and it also saves you $50. And now you have this comparison, I believe that's something you can decide for yourself. So to end this review, JM21 is a really good DAP. It performs really well, it has good user interface, it is an Android-based DAP, which means that you can install any app that you wish and any music streaming service, etc. It really does give you a lot of room to play around with it. It's also decently built, it's not too weighty and too chunky for this screen size, and last but not least, of course, it sounds really good. It has that now recognizable Fiio sound where everything sounds just right and tonally correct, and nothing from the sound is fighting for your attention, but it's a well-rounded performer. And that conclusion basically stands for the whole device. It's a well-rounded, well-priced device. And that would be all for today. I hope you liked the review. See you next time.